nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Thailand and Cambodia agree to an immediate ceasefire, pledging to halt weeks of deadly border clashes from noon local time. A joint statement says the truce covers all weapons and bans attacks on civilians, infrastructure and military targets. The Ukrainian capital of Kyiv is under a massive Russian attack, with explosions heard in the city and air defences in action. The military says multiple missiles are being deployed against the capital. This Russian action takes place just 2 days before Ukrainian President Zelensky is due to meet President Trump in the United States. The leaders plan to discuss details of a possible accord to settle the nearly 4-year war. Israel becomes the first country to formally recognise Somaliland as an independent state, with Prime Minister Netanyahu promising cooperation in key sectors. Somalia opposes secession, while President Donald Trump says he does not support US recognition. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio urges restraint and diplomacy as violence in Yemen escalates. He says Washington supports efforts towards a lasting solution while avoiding taking sides between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. French police arrest a man suspected of stabbing 3 women in the Paris metro during year-end festivities. Prosecutors say he is tracked through surveillance footage and his mobile phone before being detained north of the French capital. The UN Secretary-General says attacks on civilians and places of worship are unacceptable and calls for those responsible to be brought to justice. At least 8 worshippers are killed in an explosion at a mosque in a predominant Alawite area of Homs, claimed by Islamist State. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says ties with Russia are strengthened by sharing blood, life and death in the Ukraine war in a New Year message to Vladimir Putin. State media says his message follows Putin's greeting, praising North Korean support and lauding what he calls their invincible friendship. We start this hour in Southeast Asia, and Thailand and Cambodia have agreed today to halt weeks of their fiercest border clashes in years. The ceasefire took place at noon, with both sides agreeing to hold current troop positions. Defence ministers warned that any further reinforcements would raise tensions and hurt long-term peace efforts. The fighting lasted around 20 days and included fighter jet sorties, rocket fire and artillery barrages. At least 101 people were killed and more than 500,000 people were displaced on both sides of the border. Violence flared earlier this month after a previous ceasefire brokered with US support in July collapsed. Officials say today's agreement is aimed at restoring stability along the disputed frontier. Joining us now is Professor Veselin Popovsky, a professor and Vice Dean at Jindal Global Law School located in Tokyo. Thank you very much for joining us this hour, Professor Popovsky. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. What could have been agreed here? Obviously, we have limited information. However, we saw fighting flare up again rather easily earlier this month. What are your thoughts in what has to be settled here in order to even get a temporary truce, let alone a permanent one? I believe you might be muted.
We hear good news on both sides. Basically, both sides are positive. They say they want to de-escalate. So political statements from Thailand and Cambodia both are very positive. And I'm optimistic here, because if both sides talk about stopping the fire, it sounds good. And now whether it will last that's a difficult question to say. It's a very large border we have to understand, and it's very easy to spark. A single bullet from one side can spark an overreaction from the other side. The accusations usually go both ways, and they kind of try to find justification both ways. Thai said that the Cambodians are deploying some drones. Cambodians, the Thai troops advanced to a temple, 11th century temple, where, by the way, the conflict started from that temple when Cambodia wanted to recognize the temple as a UNESCO protected one, and Thai disagree because the temple is located in the disputed area. And because that can spark very easily, but the messages are positive because both sides recognize they should mitigate, they should defer from escalation very quickly. And hopefully it will end this round, but we don't know what happened next year and how long this dispute will. So it's by the way, it's a century-old conflict.
Yeah.
Since the was demarcated by the French colonizing Cambodia. It's a very old conflict, but very low intensity conflict. In other words, we saw the July round with 48 casualties, both civilians and military. Now we have 12 casualties, mostly civilians on the Thai side for the last couple of days. Again, low intensity, long conflict. Hopefully there will be leadership in both sides, and I'm not talking about political, but also military leadership that can exercise a proper containment.
Yeah, and what do you think pushed the both sides to agree this now? Pressure, fatigue, or real diplomatic intent to get this, as you say, centuries-old conflict concluded?
Yes, possibly both sides want to look good. They want to show to the world that their talk is positive, that they are for peace. They don't want to look aggressive. They don't want to be warriors. And that's on the political side looks promising. As I mentioned, the question is on the military side, what the military leaders will do also, and how they will tell their officers, their soldiers, their armies also to de-escalate. So it's really a place where some monitoring might be necessary, some confidence measures might be necessary. And this is where, again, I will ask, where is the United Nations here? Well, ideally, there should be a demilitarized zone monitored by the United Nations so that they are not back-to-back the Thai and the Cambodian military. If there is even a very narrow militarized zone, that will be very, very helpful here. So that might be one solution in the future.
And Professor Popovsky, as far as we know, the US involvement in negotiating this, it wasn't as substantial as prior. We had a Truth Social post from Donald Trump last time. We had one this time. It was ignored by both sides. What will this say for Donald Trump's negotiating credibility? How his first peace deal with Thailand and Cambodia fell apart in the way that it did?
Well, that's funny because Donald Trump doesn't play any role here, but he listened to the news, and if there is something somewhere, he jumps in and says, we did it. Yeah. He did nothing. It is local, it's bilateral between the two sides. Well, when they signed a peace in Kuala Lumpur back in the summer, Donald Trump volunteered to go there himself, and he made himself as a peacemaker, which is basically he's self-imposing himself every time there is a potential peace. By the way, both sides did not recognize that. They don't call it Donald Trump peace. They even don't call it Kuala Lumpur peace agreement. The Thai are very clear. It's a bilateral declaration by the Thai and Cambodian following up from a meeting in Kuala Lumpur. Nothing to do with Donald Trump. He's simply a clown that tries to get attention, and that's it.
Yes. Professor Popovsky, once again, stay with us. as we move over to more diplomacy. And Russia has accused Ukraine of trying to torpedo talks on a US plan to end the military offensive. Moscow claimed that the 20-point plan presented by Kiev this week was radically different from one previously negotiated with Washington. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rakibov said that Russia's ability to make a final push and reach an agreement would depend on their own efforts and the political will of the other side. He also noted that Kiev and its European Union backers, who he claims are against an agreement, have increased efforts to sabotage the talks. Professor Popovsky joins us once again. Of course, this original 27-point peace plan, as it was prior, was seen as favouring Moscow vastly. And to be honest, looking at some of the points, it certainly was. Now that Ukraine have altered this and had negotiations with Washington, and of course we've got that Zelensky and Trump meeting coming up on Sunday. Do you think that Moscow is concerned about losing Trump's ear here?
It must be. Moscow must be very concerned of losing not only Trump but everybody else here, because what they do is continuing the war for all these 4 years. Moscow was never serious in negotiations. That 28-point plan was basically a capitulation of Ukraine, which nobody will accept. Well, Donald Trump is playing games, but over time, obviously, that was unacceptable. Ukraine made a counter proposal, much more reasonable. They offer even free economic zone in Donbass, basically withdrawing the troops from Donbass, both sides, and making it neutral, free trade, which might, by the way, be very much in the Donald Trump's vision here. He loves trades and he loves to do business and investment. So why doesn't Russia accept that? No military whatsoever in Donbass, both sides. Ukrainians withdraw, Russians withdraw, and that land become peaceful, neutral, open for trade, open for... By the way, Donetsk, the capital of Donbass, was one of the most vibrant cities until 2014. It was #1 investment opportunity in the entire Soviet former zone. See, when Ukrainians were in charge of Donetsk, it has the best airport in Ukraine. It has one of the best stadiums in Europe. They have concerts by Beyonce, by Rihanna, and other rock celebrities will go to Donetsk until 2014. Restaurants, cafes, lovely place to visit under Ukrainian rule for 35 years. For the last 11 years, the same city under Russian rule became one of the most miserable in the world. Half of the population evacuated, houses destroyed, no water, no business. Everybody tried to escape Donetsk since Russians are there. What does it tell us about the Ukrainian rule over 30 years, making Donetsk one of the best cities in Europe? From Russian rule, exactly the opposite. That city today is one of the most miserable in the world, with people living and having no water and no business whatsoever. That explains all about Russian-Ukraine difference.
Yes, Professor Veselin Popovsky, thank you very much, as always, for talking to us. It's been a pleasure having you here on the program. We now move over to West Asia, and the United States is urging calm as tensions escalate in Yemen amid growing violence involving rival factions backed by regional powers. In a statement recently posted on X, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that Washington was concerned by recent developments in southeastern Yemen and stressed the need for a lasting political solution. Moreover, Rubio has also praised the diplomatic leadership of both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and key US partners that support competing groups within Yemen's internationally recognized government. This appeal comes as Yemen's internationally recognized government has formally asked the Saudi-led coalition to increase military support in Hadramaut, which is the country's largest province and a strategically important region bordering Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Sea. The request by Yemen follows airstrikes in that same region that Yemen's southern separatists say targeted their positions after they seized control of large parts of the province in recent days. Joining us now to discuss this development in the Middle East is Shruti Dasgupta, an international affairs expert. She joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. Giving this statement here, Shruti, do you think Yemen is on the brink of wider escalation once again? Obviously, conflict here has been going on since 2014, so over 10 years. However, is it about to escalate more?
I would assume so, because that's what the Saudis have been prepping for, which is why the pacts with the Pakistani army, as well as from what I understand, an open invitation to other mercenary groups has been issued so that the Saudi can fortify themselves and try and regain a large part of Yemen. So the Saudi-backed GCC government wants to regain control of the major ports, which is what the STC, which is the Southern Transnational Council, I believe they call themselves, and they are a very small group, but they're UAE backed, and they kind of took control of major ports, and the Hadram port that we've just been talking about is one of those. And when you have control of key areas, this STC has been asking for separation of the southern Yemen from the conflict-ridden Houthis and northern Yemen of Saudi Arabia. So they're trying to ask for their piece of the pie and try and find their zone of influence. The Houthis have their zone of influence towards the western side of Yemen, and Saudis are more towards the northern side, the mountain ranges area, which is the bordering areas, and a little bit of the middle section also. So the STC want their control. They've made demands for a separate nation. And with this particular attack or the allegations of an attack from Saudi, it seems that the Saudis are serious about not giving away even a single kilometer or an inch. In fact, they want to reclaim all these other ports and important cities so that they can control the economics, because whatever they've taken on are the oil-rich regions. The STC are now in control of the oil-rich regions, as well as the important transport points. So they want control back of Yemen, and they're preparing for it. So I think in the days to come, Yemen will see future conflicts with not just Houthis, but the STC as well.
Yeah, but who actually has the leverage here to stop this from spiraling into something wider, if anyone?
Well, surprisingly, it'll be the United States, because Saudis are backed by United States, and that is why the statement by Rubio is important, because he's trying not to choose between his two partners in the Middle East, and with the STC and the Saudi-backed GCC government. When they are asked to pick a side, they're being a little bit silent about it. But the GCC government of Saudi has the tacit approval of United States. They've helped them bomb, have led 25, if I'm not wrong, 2,500 or 25,000 attacks on that in that region itself, and it cannot be done without the United States and their approval for arms and protection. And even the Pakistani regime, which I believe is now ready to send troops, is via the persuasion of United States. So in case if there is a global power that can actually stop this, it is going to be United States. They are going to probably ask how their partners react to this particular conflict that is brewing in Yemen, but their particular focus is more Houthi-based rather than the STC-based. Whether they allow a split of the nation between the STC and the GCC-backed government is something that we'll see in the future.
Yes, Shruti, do stay with us as we have further news updates for our viewers. And the United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned the deadly attack on Friday prayers at a mosque in the Syrian city of Homs. At least 8 worshippers were killed in the explosion, which targeted a mosque in the predominantly Alawite area. A Syria Ansar al-Sunnah, an Islamist terrorist group, claimed responsibility for the attack. And in a statement, Guterres' spokesperson stressed that attacks against civilians and places of worship are unacceptable. He called for the perpetrators to be identified and brought to justice. Joining us once again is Shruti Dasgupta. Shruti, once again, strong words from the United Nations. However, is there any real pathway to accountability?
Well, first you have to identify that it's not just a mosque that was attacked. It is an Alawite, predominantly Alawite region, where this mosque is situated and which was attacked. So until and unless the United Nations is ready to acknowledge that this is not just an attack by a terrorist group, which is what I think France's reaction to it is also, that it is a terrorist attack. Until and unless you identify who is being attacked, that this is more of a genocidal claim, genocidal level, or at least a pogrom level of attack on Alawites, and as we've mentioned earlier, on Christians and Druze in Syria, despite there being a USA-backed government, unless you recognize the nature of the violence, you cannot, there is no value in any statement coming from the UN. So I believe this is targeted. This is more of a religious hate crime, which is a part of the terrorism that wrecks entire of Syria. And although people would want to say this attack is to destabilize the USA incorporated interim regime under al-Shara, formerly al-Jalani, I would assume that this has the tacit approval of al-Jalani's HTS group, which have forever targeted Alawites, Druze and Christians, and whether you want to admit to that reality or not is something we'll only see in the days to come, whether these particular minorities of Syria survive the regime change, whether we are almost a year into this and we're still hearing claims of how these people are being mistreated, they lose lives.
Yeah.
So it's not a very pretty image that comes to our head. So unless they recognize who attacked and what mosque it was, it is an incomplete picture that the UN is painting to the world.
What I want to focus on, Shruti, is the limitations of the United Nations. Do you think statements like this do deter future attacks, or have they lost credibility on the international stage now?
Statements are just statements. Governments use them to project positivity or negativity against a particular action or a set of actions or policies. And your appreciators will use it to say, look, you've done so well, or if the statement is positive, and if the statement is negative, the world will come together in unity and say, oh, it's so bad. But unless a statement like this is backed by a peacekeeping force or by sanctions or any other further action that propels the government of the nation into taking action, whether to protect its minorities or whether to detract a policy that is harmful to its people, or to ensure that the human rights of people living in that particular region is not affected, those statements are basically just words on paper. It does not translate into action. The UN, I have found in the past couple of years, being fairly lacking in terms of action. We see statements for Ukraine, we see statements on Gaza, but no action. And the action, without action, UN just becomes a giant mouthpiece where the world voice is heard, but no action is taken against people who are actually perpetrators of crimes against humanity.
Shruti Dasgupta, as always, pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for taking the time. We now move on to our final story of the hour. And Nvidia has struck a major deal with AI startup Groq. The chipmaker will license Groq's technology and hire its CEO, Jonathan Ross, a former Google AI veteran. Groq specializes in interference, helping trained AI models respond quickly to user requests. Nvidia dominates AI training, but faces stiff competition in interference from rivals like AMD and other startups. The deal is non-exclusive, meaning Groq will remain independent under CEO Simon Edwards, with its cloud business continuing. Financial details were not disclosed, though reports suggested a $20 billion valuation. Analysts warn antitrust concerns could arise even as Nvidia gains Groq's leadership and technical talent. This move follows a trend where tech giants acquire talent and tech without full company takeovers. Well, that is all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.